What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Indie Inkwell. My name is JJ, one of your hosts as always. And 3 weeks in a row, somehow the Air Force has not kept him away from us for 3 weeks. Please welcome my co-host, Michael. What is going on, man?
What is up, brother? What is up, all of our listeners? I know it's crazy to see me 3 times in a row, but
I know
I'm
normally we're
here.
lucky to get you 2 in a row.
I
We
know,
got
I
you three in
know.
a row this time.
Let's see if we can make it four. If we can make
We'll
it
see if
four,
we can make it a whole
woo,
month without your work getting in the way. We'll see. But
man.
today we're no sponsor read. We're just going to get straight into today's interview because I'm excited about this project. It looks like it's going to be super awesome. Please, everybody, welcome indie comic book writer T.S. Luther. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi, how's it going? I'm TS and I write comics.
You know how much I see that on my For You page. Hi, my name is TS and I write comics.
In case you were curious, in case you didn't know, like if you're
No, I
confused, and
think
don't
it's
ask me
great.
why I
I've even got the
paused.
cadence down in my head. Like,
Yeah, that's just the stroke that I have every time I turn the camera on. Just
hey,
like it
that's
slowly
branding,
extends.
ladies and gentlemen. Like, I've got the cadence of his video intros ingrained into my head. Like,
Oh, man.
so Oliver656 says, "Hey, ha ha ha, yup." So apparently, I'm not the only one.
It's meant to be an earworm. Honestly, it started because I used to host a lot of podcasts, I used to do a lot of YouTube, and I never knew how the hell to like intro and like to say hello, and it changed every single time. So I was like, okay, branding. My name's TS. I write comics. You know who I am. If it's the first time you watch one of my videos, you know what I'm about. And if you're annoyed by that, you can go somewhere else. Before we jump into it, you already know. And like it gets stuck in your head, so I'll be haunting your dreams. And the only way to get it out is to buy my comics.
See, there it is. That's a
Yes.
sales pitch right there. Either buy my comic or you'll never ever forget me.
It's either that or buy my comic or my kids will starve. That's on you.
Hey, that's also some motivation right there.
That's marketing 101 right there.
Oh, looking forward to the show, Cycle Cleveland. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now,
Appreciate it.
we like to get everybody's origin story. Every good comic book character has an origin story. So I feel like every good comic book creator has an origin story. What is your origin story?
I mean, I was born fully formed like this. I look like an unhoused wizard on purpose, like I always tell people I look like Doc Brown if he was not good at science. That's kind of the vibe I'm going for. But actually, I was born in the middle of nowhere, northern Michigan, like in the middle of the woods. No comic books around, nothing to be found. But I was obsessed with the nerdy stuff. And eventually, my parents, I think they were kind of churchy at the time, they bought me a Superman comic. My first Superman comic, my first comic like ever, and it was the death of Superman for some reason, which is great to buy a little child,
Right,
introduce
not
them to
not
superheroes.
not slightly traumatizing at
Yeah,
all.
let's traumatize you for your first comic.
Exactly. I'm like, oh, I love this. Superman's so cool. And then he dies. This is wonderful.
And he doesn't
Also,
just die. Like, it's not like it's just like, oh, he passed in his sleep from a disease or something, you know?
Oh
Like,
no.
no.
it's so brutal. And also, I was so confused at what Superman is because, when he gets resurrected, he's in the black suit. He's got a mullet. He's got a big ass
The
gun.
90s were a strange time for
It was
Yeah.
such a weird time to get into comics, and so that was what I thought Superman was. Turns out the reason why they did it is because Jesus, resurrection, Easter. There was kind of a motif they were going for. I didn't catch on. I just thought Superman with the mullet was badass, and now I love comics. So it all works out in the end. But up
Right.
until I don't know, Civil War about with Marvel, I didn't have a lot of comics in my life other than Saturday morning cartoons, obviously the Superman comic book, and then Archie. Double Digest was available, at the grocery store. So that was my comics upbringing, was Archie comics.
That's awesome. Why Archie? Like, was that just what was
That's
there
what was
or
available, man. Like there
Yeah.
was no comic book store, no bookstores for at least an hour away. I lived literally in the middle of the woods. So like
Oh,
that's what I could
okay.
get my hands on. And then when I was not to date myself, but 9 or 10 when Civil War was happening, I was able to get to a comic book store and I saw how the entire book was taken up by that Civil War tag. And that kind of changed everything. I was like, "Oh, I get it. This is an event. I've heard about this. I heard about when Magneto and Xavier fused into Onslaught. I've heard the stories on the playground. I want to be a part of this." And I was finally able to get to, I think it was Borders or Barnes and Noble was one of the two in our mall. And I see our mall an hour away, and I would make the trek. I would beg, borrow, and steal a ride, giving people spare change so I could get to the comic book store and read from there. And I never stopped since.
Oh wow, that's awesome. That's very unique. Like the fact that you went out of your way, to experience this fandom. You don't hear that a lot. So that means like comics hold a very special place in your heart for you to
Oh
go
yeah.
out of your way. Yeah.
Well, and I feel like that's a similar story with a lot of people, like, especially back in the 90s. There was a couple of comic book stores around my town, but they were, like, dark, dingy. You felt like you weren't allowed to be in there, like, it was kinda it had those they all had that vibe back then.
Yeah, there's like a magic to it, but also it's like, okay, so I'm going to get my books, and then I'm going to try not to get stabbed on the way out. That's the best
Right.
kind of comic book store. It's like,
And
it's like the
normally,
best,
there was no danger of anything like that, like
No, there's going to be a dude with a ponytail who's going to smell a little weird, and he's going to help you turn on like the best books. But
Right,
you
the
didn't know
store's
as a
gonna smell a
kid,
little funky, like, luckily, that that style of shop has kinda died off, I think, at this point,
Yeah.
or is in the process of, but yeah.
Every once in a while, I'll stumble into one, and those are always the shops that give me the most like crap when it comes to me pitching my books. They're like, I don't know, you're on Kickstarter, I don't vibe with that. But they always put my books up, as much as like the crap that they talk, and as much as weird that they smell, and it's dangerous going out there. They always, at the end of the day, put my books on the shelf, and that's the magic of comic book stores like that, man.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. That's
So
crazy. So like how so growing up you said Archie, right?
Yeah.
So has that like stayed with you? Like do you still like read Archie every now and then?
Oh hell yeah, man! I wish I had it. I have one of my old bosses found out I loved Archie, and she gave me almost every single issue in this like gigantic binder. It's like this, and I still flip through it. I still love it. It really informed like the slice of life stuff, the dialogue in my books. Like it really sticks
Yeah.
with me. And when they did the reboot with like Fiona Staples and stuff, that was magic in a bottle for me. I love that. I kind of fell off since then, but I love Jughead with Zdarsky and stuff. So I'm still into Archie, and Archie always changes with the time. So I'm sure I'll jump in the next big round that they have.
I would say even though, like, their main artist and writer, Dan Parent, he's been there for, what, 27 years
Oh
now?
yeah, yeah.
I was lucky enough to, host an interview with him at GalaxyCon this past year. Super, super nice guy. But, yeah, he that was one big thing he talked about, was how Archie tries to change with the times to keep up with things. That's like when he created the character Kevin. Help me with the last name.
I don't remember the last name. I know the character you're talking
I
about.
know you're
though.
talking about. I know you're
The,
talking about.
the first openly gay character in Archie comics, and I'm sure that he said that it did upset some people when it first
Oh,
came
yeah.
out. Like,
Yeah, the kind of people that you don't need reading your book, especially if
right,
you're
and
Archie.
the
Like
people
Archie's
that
so big,
upset
but
didn't really read Archie. It was the same people who were upset when John Kent came out a couple years
exactly.
ago
You
as
weren't
bisexual.
reading. You were
No, it
not
was
reading
people on Fox
Superboy.
News. I'm
Come
like,
on.
come on, you're not reading comic books. Like,
But Archie was a big thing, like, Jughead being kind of asexual in some runs and not in other ones was a big opening for a lot of friends of mine who were like, oh, I think I'm asic. I think I'm
mhm.
not interested in people in that sense. And Jughead was always the one that they referenced. So, like, Archie had always kind of changed with the times. I think the biggest downfall, though, were the covers. As much as I love them, people thought that's what the interior of the book always looked like. And it kind of turned some younger readers off. I know when I would bust out my Archie comics and everybody else had like X-Men and Wolverine, they were like,
Mhm.
what the hell? And I'm like, oh, it doesn't look like that on the inside, even though it would have been fine if it did. But it did kind of throw some people off. They're like, oh, that old comic. I'm like, no, it's still new. This is from yesterday. I got it at the grocery store
Right.
next to the
Thank
Soap
you,
Opera
Lucky
Digest.
33, Kevin Keller. That I was leaning that
Thank
way, but
you.
I didn't want to say it and be wrong. I could not remember the last name.
They'll roast you if you get a character name wrong. They'll know. That's why I write the
Oh.
thing. That's why I don't talk about them, is because if I get it wrong, that's canon. If you get it wrong, they're gonna come after you.
Hey, I've
Hey.
always said I've never claimed to be an expert. I only claim to be well versed. Yeah,
That's a good. That's a
That's a
good
bar.
out. That's a good way
bar.
to play it.
So was Archie, like, did that give you a lot of inspiration towards the style of books you wanted to write, since that's kind of what you really enjoyed growing up?
I mean, I've always loved the other stuff, and trust me, it was kind of a breath of fresh air when I could read Spider-Man on the weekly and check all
Right.
those other books. But what it did was is not turn me off to stories that didn't have a lot of action. So like my jump to independent and creator-owned comics happened a lot earlier than a lot of my peers and a lot of my friends because I wasn't afraid of something that didn't have Spider-Man punching Kingpin every 2 pages. I didn't need to have a double page spread where somebody, shot the biggest gun ever with all of the pouches in order for it to be entertaining.
Right.
So, what I think it opened me up to a lot more, different stories and the kinds of stories that more like I guess kids that at that age wouldn't have cared about. So since then, like I was able to brush up and talk more on dialogue and the quieter moments than I think some writers when they first jump in, like they're kind of afraid to do that.
Yeah, because I
Right.
think a lot of new creators is they want to hit everybody right in the face with a lot of action right off the bat to try and hook them. And I'm like, that doesn't always work though.
That is
As I say, I
true.
think in like page 2 of Tokyo Fire, I think there's a chase scene. So I guess like it might not be
Well,
the best example, but
well, like I said, it doesn't always work.
right, right.
It
That's
can
true.
work, but you have to balance that out. Like if I'm
The
reading the
quiet
first
moments
issue,
are
so
good.
the most recent run of Spider-Man is a perfect example. It
Yeah.
started off with all kinds of craziness going on, and I had no idea what the hell was happening for 25 issues. Like, I'd like to have
Nonstop thrill
some idea of
rides,
what's
yeah.
going on before all the action starts.
Exactly. Like a nonstop thrill ride is great. And then you start to get tired. And then you're just like, can they just talk to somebody? And then, like, with those quieter moments, let your characters breathe. Like, it's hard to do a ton of character building all the time when it's just between punches. That's a kind of a difficult
Mhm.
thing
True.
to do. And if you let your readers understand early on that it's not going to be just that, you're going to weed out the people who only want the action. And you're going to kind of ingratiate the audience to, okay, sometimes they're going to be talking. Sometimes there's going to be dialogue. Sometimes they're going to be sitting behind a booth, shooting the shit with their friends, and it's going to be okay. So, like,
Right.
I tend to like throw in a dialogue sequence pretty early on in the issue, even if there's a fight scene or an action sequence, so people know, hey, it's not just going to be action from page to page to page.
Right, and that's refreshing, like, because like I said, a lot of the times nowadays, it seems like it's either or. You either get a
100%.
whole bunch of action or it's like a slog to read through
Yeah.
because it's all dialogue.
A
True.
comic that I think does it really well, and I can't speak to like the entire massive verse, but Radiant Black I think did a really good job when it came to like a newer, superhero comic that balanced it out. Where like, hey, there's going to be action, there's going to be crazy sci-fi stuff, but also a lot of our characters are just going to sit and talk,
I
whether
was gonna
they're
say the
bad
first
guys
couple
versus
of
good
issues of
guys.
Radiant Black were actually pretty slow paced if you go
100%.
back
It
and read the
actually turned
first
me
couple
off a
like
little
2 or
bit
3
at
issues.
first. Yeah, like I wasn't expecting that.
I mean, pacing it is very important. Like you never know. Like sometimes if I read a comic, especially a single issue, right? And if it's too quickly paced, I'm like, oh my god, I just read this in like 5 minutes, man. Like I'm not even like, did I even get my money's worth? You know? So it's like
Right.
I definitely
Like
appreciate those moments where a writer can take their time to like, you know, just have two characters talk, give us some character moments, what that's what makes us fall in love with the characters, you know?
like a good example, look at Something Is Killing the Children. They took
Hell yeah.
time to build the character and the world around Erica
Mhm.
Slaughter. And now that's one of, like, the most popular indie characters in the world right now.
Yes.
And it's not going to go away anytime soon. That every spinoff they do, I'm like, oh, I got to be there day one. My wife
Oh,
loves
yeah,
Something
I'm
to Kill
still
the
buying them
Children.
all. I mean
And it's so great. And like that's like Tynion has such like a masterclass in pacing. If you read those books, like that was one of not the only book I've ever seen, but one of the best modern opening title sequences in a comic book. They use an entire double page spread to show you the title, and you can't control the pacing for a reader when it comes to comic books. They're going to look at it at their own speed. The only things you can do is add that page turn, add those double page spreads, add those quiet moments of dialogue to try to slow them down. And he does it so well with things like that. And it makes you care about Erica Slaughter when she's talking instead of stabbing some new, monster in the middle of the night. I give a crap. I want to hear what they say. I want to hear what all of them say, but it's just so good. I could speak on Tynion for days. It's one of my favorite.
I think we all
writers.
could. We're all big
Oh,
Tiny
yeah.
fans.
We're all
around
big
here.
fans.
Let's just
Yeah.
have him on. This would be way more interesting. Let's talk to him.
The
instead.
invitation is open, Mr. Tiny.
It is. You're watching.
But let's get into what you came to talk about today.
Sure.
And that's your book, Tokyo Fire. Should we play him the trailer video you sent us?
Hell yeah. If it's not too long, I don't know how long that one is, but
we
go ahead.
we usually stay on for an hour, so we'll go ahead and just show it, man.
Let's shoot it.
All right, let's see. Where is it at? There it is.
Okay, so let's talk about Tokyo Fire. We got two thieves, Tib and Ren. They reside in the futuristic but not so wonderful irradiated slums known as Lower Tokyo. Definitely more Akira than Back to the Future 2. They spend most of their time taking whatever isn't nailed down from the upper levels, trying to scrape up enough cash to survive and eventually get out, because Lower Tokyo is filled to the gills with harmful radiation, warring gangs, and they are rumored to have superhuman abilities, and of course the cops and bootlickers looking to maintain the status quo, which just so happens to be keeping the people of Lower Tokyo exactly where they are, firmly on the ground, in the filth and radiation, for cheap labor, and the peace of mind for the people in the shining city above. So when Tim and Red, girl boss, just a little too close to the sun, and get caught boosting a brand new hover bike, their mentor Lee, who taught them everything they know, gets roped into the whole thing trying to save their butts. But Lee's trying to go straight, so they call in a favor from one of the aforementioned gangs to make sure everyone stays out of the prison work camps. So now if they've stolen something from someone they shouldn't have, they have to ask a favor from someone they shouldn't ask, and when they attempt to fulfill said favor, well, they see something they shouldn't have seen. A new gang of fire starters terrorizing the city. So now there aren't many crosshairs left not trained on our lovable ne'er-do-wells. Did I miss anything? Well, just in case, just to sum up, after botching the one last job that was supposed to get them up and out of Lower Tokyo, Tiv and Ren, along with their mentor Lee, are caught between superpowered gangs, a violent police state, a class revolution, and a leather-clad pyrokinetic madman trying to burn it all down. Thieves, family, flame. Tokyo will burn. Written by T.S. Luther of Growing Up, drawn by Sky Hawkins from Exhaust, and lettered by Mike Stock from Dead Roots, Tokyo Fire is a 7-issue limited series that follows two thieves as they navigate the final days of their city and unravel the conspiracy that led to its downfall. With your help, we can jumpstart issue number 1 and start telling the story of Lower Tokyo's descent into ash.
I love it.
I love it. Sign me up. Sign me up, man. Oh, dude. If no one after seeing that knows that is like, it just looks like it's fun, bro. It looks like, when it's Akira, oh, I was already in. I love freaking Akira, man. That's one of the best, anime like movies ever, and the manga's good as well. So tell me about the obvious, anime manga influences. Have you because I know you didn't really mention anime and manga in your origin story. Like, when did you get into that world or that fandom?
Yeah, it was the 90s, so it was all around, obviously, right? Like Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Ghost in the Shell, Toonami, all of those things. So I fell in love with it right around the same time that everybody else did from that generation. And when it came to the 90s anime, Sailor Moon was a big
Cowboy
one.
Bebop, all that
Exactly.
stuff.
Staying up way too late and Inuyasha
Way
starts,
too late.
seeing Yu Yu Hakusho and you're expecting Dragon Ball Z and then somebody
Yu Yu
dies.
is one of my favorite animes of all
It's
time.
so good. And
man, the theme song.
Oh, such a bop, right? I think it made a bunch of little kids from the 90s fall in love with jazz. You know what I mean? That's such a strange time, with that and Cowboy Bebop. You hear a saxophone play and you're like, oh, okay, it's Toonami time. Or Adult Swim, But yeah, so I fell in love with a lot of that stuff around that time. And then obviously bootleg tapes of Akira that just floated around, random flea markets and stuff like that. I think I had the US dub, but it had French subtitles for some reason. And so it was super formative for me, just not so much in the comic book sense until I started reading manga in my 20s. Segued from Scott Pilgrim into picking up things like Fairy Tail was a big one. And then I went back and found a bunch of the classics, and now it's a mainstay. It's half the shelf over here, so it's a lot easier to fill up a shelf with manga because they're so thick and you only buy them in the volumes. You're not getting a single issue, but yeah, so pretty early on too, I think when it came to the influence of my writing, this was the first big one that was as heavily manga influenced, and that was partly because of Sky Hawkins, my co-creator on this one, and her art style.
Okay, yeah, I definitely like the art. I love the cyberpunk aesthetic to it. It's really good. It looks very high intense, you know.
Gives off a very Jet Set Radio future. If
Hell
anybody
yeah, yeah.
remembers that on the Dreamcast. Well, I guess
Oh
now it's
yeah.
on like Xbox and PlayStation. You can get it everywhere
Right.
now, but play that thing on a toaster at this point, probably.
It's coming back. They just announced a new one, which is pretty exciting.
They
But
put
like
out
that's
a couple recent ones too that look just like it. There's one called
right.
Hi-Fi
Yeah.
Rush. There's
Oh yeah.
there's Jet Set Radio. There's Jet Grind Radio. Like there was a whole bunch of remakes of it.
Yeah, and like that art style definitely was a big like informing part of the story going in. I wanted it to look like that, but I was holding on to it because I didn't know an artist who drew anything like that. And then I found Sky Hawkins and her comic book Exhaust, and I reached out and I said literally this. I was like, "Hey, I would love to work with you. I have this story. It's like Scott Pilgrim meets Akira." And she said immediately that she was in, and we've been working together ever since. And that's kind of the vibe that we were going for. It's got its serious moments. It's got all the anime shenanigans, but it also has a lot of heart, a lot of fun, and high intensity, but there's still moments of levity where they're going to chill and talk and, you know, have those Archie moments because, again, that's where my influence comes from.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I could definitely see this like being. It looks like it's perfect for like an animation, man. The fact you mentioned like Toonami, like man, I could see this coming on Toonami. Like,
I would love that, obviously. Like movie vibes, you know, like the animation, like in this, like when I look at it and the way that Sky draws is so cinematic, it is prime for an adaptation like that. The thing is, you know, I don't have that choice. I don't get to, I don't get to sell people on that, you know.
Well, I mean, I feel like, you know, you team up with an animator, you know, I feel like you could do it if you put some money into it. I'm sure it wouldn't be cheap, but
As you can see from my apartment, I'm rolling in it, you know, like we got that Barbie dream house. That's not cheap, you know, like
oh
that's
no,
a lot
dude,
of money.
those can cost a little bit.
Sadly, that's where all the money goes, is to things like that. There's no money left for comics. And I don't know if you've heard from the other indie creators that you have on here. There's not a lot of money in the comics when it comes to like the bread that we have. Any money that we get goes right into making another issue or anything like that. So at the end of the day, what's left over, it's like if there is anything left over, goes to the next issue if we can.
No, that's awesome. I mean, you can't. Everybody wants, you know, their first comic book to pay for the next comic book, and I'm like, it's almost never going to happen that way unless you come out with a banger and promote it just right and get it. That, you know, I mean, it's so hard to get something to go crazy viral these days.
Oh yeah. I tell people all the time, like if you want to break into comics, like if you want to go over and like work at Image and then Marvel and DC and back to Image, which is like, you know, that Kirkman manifesto, you know, cycle. If you want to do that, it takes a lot of luck or a lot of privilege and a lot of one to cancel out the other. Otherwise, you got to work at it for a really long time. And that takes a lot of runway. I try to warn people a lot getting into it. You might meet an artist, you might, you know, partner with somebody who wants to do it for free, and you both can, you know, work together to try to create your own business and eventually break in. But a lot of times you're paying a lot of money to some really talented artists who deserve it, but not a lot of money goes into your pockets. So you got to have a contingency plan. You got to have runway built in. You got to have some rich benefactors. You got to have some back alley deals. You got to have something in the works if you want to make it happen. What you do in that back alley is up to you. I'm not here to judge, but you got to be earning some scratch if you're going to make it.
yes, what's the Oh man, so when is this set to release?
We were aiming for at the end of December, and we heard so many horror stories about not getting these proofs back, right? People getting, you know, books, either they messed up or the printing companies messed up. So we were focusing on the proofs, and then we hired a couple of language consultants because something that you don't get necessarily from the trailer and everything is that Tokyo Fire is a little bit high concept, right? The idea is that the Chinese government has taken over like half the world. That includes includes Japan. And so it's far flung into the future, and they're part of the Eastern Empire. Well, that means a lot of the background stuff is in Chinese. There's Japanese graffiti all over the
You had to
place.
make sure all that stuff was accurate.
100%. We didn't want to offend anybody. We wanted to do our due diligence on
Not
it.
just
So
put a bunch of random Chinese characters all over the
Yeah.
place. and just
exactly.
call it
Like,
a day.
it's just like, you know, you get a tattoo on you. It's like, oh, look at that. It says dumpling. You know, like we didn't want to do
Right.
that. And
Right.
so we put the work in. We got some awesome language consultants, and surprise, surprise, the middle-aged white dude messed up some of the language. I speak a little bit of Japanese, and I've studied a little bit of it, but it wasn't perfect. The syntax was off on a lot of the stuff that I had suggested. So we hired people who knew what they were doing, and they were fixing it up. So we're looking at the end of January, early February to ship out to people, because all of the artwork's done. All of the lettering is done. We're just waiting on changing a few of these things so we can ship it out to people. And I have 1,000 Gemini boxes filling up my apartment.
Yeah, I know the feeling on the Gemini boxes, and I don't even make comic books. I just order them and sometimes sell them. So there's a lot of those mailers sitting around. But Anne wants to know if you knew Sky already, or if you found them and how you found them.
No, I didn't know Sky before the whole project thing. I troll every single site you can think of that can show off artist portfolios, especially ones that are focused on comics. Lucky 33 Comics has it right. I found her on ArtStation in her comic, and they were super diligent. They had been working so hard, and they put out a consistent like product every single month. She was putting out this webcomic, and so I had reached out to lots of different artists through ArtStation, but she was one of the first that I was like, hey, I'm not just going to pitch you a bunch of ideas that you might like. I have this one singular idea that I want to work with you on. Are you interested? Which normally I reach out and I say, hey, do you hate me? If not, let's talk about comics. And then I pitch a comic that maybe they'd like, and I give them a bunch of choices, and then I'll start writing it. This was a project that I had already written. I had it ready to go, and I was looking for that perfect artist, and I just found her from searching on ArtStation.
And I think that is a good tip for any creator trying to either find an artist or a writer or get on a podcast like ours. Having a finished idea is going to get you a lot farther than just a script or like just concept art, or you got to come with something a little bit more fleshed out. Because I have had people send me just concept art, and I'm like, dude, I don't know what to do with this. This is cool. I'll give you that. I can't draw it, but I don't know what to have you on the show to talk about with just character sketches.
That is true. Yeah.
The thing that I tell people a lot. Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
No, I mean that can definitely happen, because it's like you need, especially for an independent comic, right? And if you want people to support it or even back it on Kickstarter, I think you have to give people a little bit more, right? Because if you look at like some of the bigger names, bigger characters, like, I don't know, Spider-Man, right? People are going to buy a Spider-Man comic. They've been buying Spider-Man comics for years, right? And I think it's harder, especially in independent spaces. You really have to sell people on it. And shoot, the fact that you went out of your way to make a freaking trailer, I think you're the first one on the show that has made a trailer for us, right?
Not the first.
Not the first? Okay.
No. And it's getting more prominent. I'm noticing more and more comic creators using trailers. On my old podcast, I had quite a few creators send me trailers. So it is becoming a more popular practice, and I think it's something that more people need to do, because that's how they sell movies.
Yes, yes.
I mean, why would you? They even have trailers for books these days,
and
like just regular novels.
Exactly, like they have trailers for novels. They've had
video games,
comic books for a long time. It just came from a lot of like the bigger artists, right? Like when Marvel would have a big crossover, you have Avengers versus X-Men that had a trailer. It was Motion Comics. The reason why I did it specifically was to compete with all the other Kickstarters that were happening at that moment. And I was on Zoop, which was already a new platform. And I'd say back it on Zoop, and people were like, what the hell is Zoop? And I noticed that even like the big names that were on Zoop didn't didn't have a trailer. They just had, you know, the writer sitting in a chair like this, poorly lit and kind of spouting exposition. And that wasn't doing the best, right? Like they were selling the book on their names, not on the product. And so I was like, well, no one gives a shit who TS is. Sadly, not as many people knew who Sky was. So I made the coolest trailer I could with my dorky voice on it. And that's what I was like hoping would get some attention. And it worked. I mean, that's still my most prominent video on TikTok is the trailer for Tokyo Fire.
Wow.
Well, I mean, it's well animated. It's edited well. It's, you know, you're not, you can still hear your voiceover over the music in the background, which is a huge thing that people screw up on all the time. They make their background music way too loud over top of what they're trying to say, and then nobody can even understand what you're saying. Or
Well,
like
thank
you
you.
said, they're just sitting in a bedroom somewhere and just talking about their book. There's no excitement in their tone of voice. There's no like there's no visual passion behind what they're doing. If
Yeah,
you don't look
100%.
excited about your project, how in the world am I supposed to be excited about it?
Exactly.
Yeah, and like most people aren't going to read all the way through the page. Like you only have a few seconds to hook them, and you only have even like a few seconds of that video to get them interested. And so what I needed to sell is, hey, do you like cyberpunk crap? Check this out, because that usually, if you like cyberpunk, I'll get you for a little bit longer. Okay, then you realize it's a comic book. Maybe I have them for a little bit longer after that, and then you can get into more of the shenanigans and who the characters are and what they care about. But I needed to sell those vibes really early, and I've done trailer editing for like a decade now, so that wasn't too much of like a difficult
That was
thing. And now
already
with-
a skill you had in the side pocket. So.
Exactly. And with things like CapCut, like everybody can do like a pro version of what I did, even with the free version if you wanted to.
Oh
Just
yeah,
takes the
like
time,
here,
like,
I'll
you know,
even give
don't
away
sleep.
my secret. I use the free version of CapCut
Exactly.
for all my editing right now because I don't feel like paying
100%.
for anything at the moment. So
Why would
Me
you?
too, yeah.
Yeah, why
Me
would
too.
you do the Adobe suite for $100 a month
when
to
CapCut
get 4
literally does the
videos?
exact same thing I need it to do.
Exactly. Like I hate contributing to the machine that is the giant corporation behind TikTok, but listen, it works. The integration is right there. You click the button, it
And for
sends
people
it.
who
You know?
don't know how to like go through and professionally edit something, CapCut is really nice and easy. And it's something that a person like if they're not like you and have the editing background already, you know, and they're trying to get a content creation thing going to promote their comic book, CapCut's a great way to edit stuff
Oh yeah, and you
because
can
it's
do it
super
yourself.
easy. You could do it with a couple buttons. You could click, 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 boom, it's done.
100%. And if you're like a little unsure, like a lot of people are hiring a lot of, I would say scammy. I'm just going to say it, that a lot of scammy places that are paying them thousands of dollars to make kind of only okay trailers, right?
Mhm.
And you can do it yourself. The tools are there. If you're going to pay, you can pay relatively cheap and you can do it yourself. It'll look pretty good, or at least better than a lot of the competition for free. And you should do it because a lot of the places that are offering those services, they're pretty predatory.
Yeah. And my day job is video editing and marketing online. So it is a very scammy industry.
Your
It's-
competition, right? Like
yeah,
you
my
work for an actual
competition will
house
charge you
and
$25,000 and not guarantee you a damn result.
yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
I'll make a 60-second trailer for you for $150. No, I
Right.
can't guarantee results, but it's only going to be $150.
In a lot of that, like that works out, but there's this like cottage industry that's popped up specifically around Kickstarter that just
Mhm.
takes advantage of people who are just trying to live their passions and
Kickstarter
maybe do it without.
promotional packages.
Exactly. Yeah, like
Mhm.
and
I've
that's
seen a
exactly what I'm
lot
talking
of that
about.
on Twitter.
And they say like, well, we promise to promote it and to create a trailer for you and build your page, and you get a page that you could have made in 10 minutes for $1,000 with a trailer that they made with AI that doesn't even, you know, read and do your product right, and they don't even do a banner that fits the correct size. I've seen it like 100 times when I was researching how do I make a Kickstarter, and that's partly why I went with Zoop. Is I didn't have to mess with any of that. I could make my trailer. They tell you exactly what they want you to put on the page that's worked for the past campaigns, and they walk you through it step by step. So I would recommend if you're going to get into comic books and you want to do a Kickstarter, start with something like Zoop that will walk you through it and not send you an email to a consultant who will charge you a back end fee and then, you know, walk away. I've seen that also with Kickstarter, which is a little bit scary.
Well, and then there's also these like, I'm not going to name any company names, but there's one in particular I've got on the top of my head thinking of for this. But they'll be like, come join our publishing house. And it's not a publishing house. It's you making really horrible TikTok and Twitter posts trying to promote these books that you're claiming to be a publisher for.
Yeah, and then they try to steal your copyright. And
Yeah, and then they try to
you
take
know?
the ownership of your characters and stuff. And it's like, bro, no, you're not a publisher. You're a really bad PR guy, is what you are. Like,
And there's already so much negative sentiment when it comes to like indie creators a lot of times with the bigger publishers that I talk to so many indie creators and they're not trying to break in. They don't care. They don't want to work for Image. They don't want to go do stuff for Marvel. They want to make their books and that's it. And that's partly because it's hard to break in and it's not necessarily a fair system, which it never pretended to be, but then you have these other companies
with Image,
who are
it is more indie than people give it credit for.
Sure,
Image does not own 90% of those properties in those books.
Yeah,
That's what I try to drill that into
office.
people's head because that's an argument that I've gotten into a lot of times online, and people like accuse me of not knowing what the hell I'm talking about because they're like, Image isn't indie. I'm like, not all of Image is indie.
Right.
You know, like Skybound is not indie.
Huge.
That's, I mean, technically it is. It's Robert Kirkman, but that's
it's got Walking Dead money.
He's
Kirkman's got the
two
money.
series on there that make billions. Like,
come on, he has the rights to Transformers and G.I. Joe now. Like, that's
he
not,
snaked it.
so,
He got it from IDW, which like sucks.
Yeah.
Like, IDW, like you can see IDW slowly having a hard time this year. Luckily,
well,
they got
I think
the
that's why
TMNT
IDW
license,
is starting to bring in more indie books.
100%.
Because they're realizing there's a heavy market for it, and these guys want to work. These guys want to put books out. Let's bring them in. Like,
and it's something that I talk about a lot. Is I do want to work in the industry, right? Like, if somebody hit me up tomorrow from any of those publishers, I'm in. Obviously, that's what I want to do. I want to go play with their toys, but I love making my own too. But like, I want to do that stuff. But the thing that I try to remind young creators or new people getting into it is, it's not necessarily a pipe dream. It's not impossible. But you're going to take, a cut. You're going to have a really hard time trying to do it.
And if you want names, you can message me later online. And
exactly,
I'll
we'll name some
in.
names later.
I'm not going to do that to people on camera, though, because I'm not one of those people that likes to start online arguments.
We don't need that smoke, all right? I don't want to.
We're just on here trying to promote indie stuff.
But when it comes to
message me later.
A lot of those, like those creators who want to break in, you just got to know that the landscape is so saturated with super talented people. And unlike it used to be, the system doesn't chew them up and spit them out the same way, right? Like, they're not fired every day. They're paid livable wages. They can do enough work that they can stay in comics. They love comics too. Why would Tynion quit, right? Why would Kyle Stark stop making books if they're still hiring them? They're loving it. You have people like Kelly Sue DeConnick. Isn't it awesome that she still can make comics and we don't see her burned out and hating the industry like some of our heroes? Look at what happened to Kirby, right? Like, you don't see that same thing happen. So while it's sad that there isn't as many positions open for people like me breaking in, I'm still super thankful that the industry isn't as predatory as it used to be, and that I still get books from those people, right? Like, I don't get an opportunity as much, but I still get to read awesome books, and I still love comics.
Well, and if you look at how the industry's kind of shaped out, especially since the pandemic, I think it's gotten a lot more open to indie people, and the audience has gotten a lot more accepting of indie books. They've gotten a lot more willing to try new stuff.
100%.
Because I think during the pandemic, a lot of people got burnt out on superheroes. Because it was MCU. It was MCU for like
everywhere.
10 years.
You had all the Disney Plus shows that were coming out. It was oversaturation of everything. So, I mean, of course, people were also reading comics, but when you're starting to see, these characters pop up literally everywhere, they don't feel as special anymore. Right?
Yeah.
So you want something a little bit that's gonna, tickle the brain,
you want, like, you want a random character with blue hair riding a jet motorcycle down the highway. You
need that character, right? And if you need this, go to campykillcreations.com, go check it out. But a lot of what you need too is to understand that people are now.
If you scan that QR code right there on the screen, everybody, it will take you to campykillcomics.com or campykillcreations.com. I forget what it's called, but it takes you there.
It takes you to campykillcreations.com. You're the best. Thank you.
We
But
got
a
more
lot
for
of
you
it
later.
too is that people are willing to shop places that aren't as big, right? So when it comes to needing those gatekeepers, if you're only shopping on Comixology, Amazon.com, at the Barnes and Noble, you're going to get a smaller breadth of comics. But with people on TikTok and for a little while, people like buying stuff on Instagram, when you're willing to go to other sites other than the biggest ones, you're going to open up the door to a lot of indie creators like me, like people willing to buy my comic book from my website. That wouldn't have happened a few years ago. I would have advised people not to do that. Like, oh, it's not on eBay, it's not on Amazon. Don't give that site your credit card. That's dangerous. And it's not as dangerous anymore. It's a lot more acceptable to buy a product from a random site directly from, the producer.
I do it all the time. I probably shouldn't, but I do it all the time.
It's been a decade since someone tried to steal my identity, so I'm okay.
I do
with
it, but I do it through PayPal.
Sure, exactly.
I do
exactly.
do a lot of stuff
to be a little
PayPal,
bit
yeah.
more safe. Yeah.
Exactly, but people are willing to do it, which means they're more willing to take a chance. A lot of it was, well, if I couldn't get on the main page of Comixology, no one will ever read my book. Like, again, we've talked about Tokyo Fire. I have more eyes on Tokyo Fire now than people have ever even heard of my original comic book growing up. And that was because I put it on Comixology because there was no other choice. There was nowhere else to put it.
Where now, especially if you're trying to just publish digitally and you're not worried about getting anything printed, they've got Tapas.io. They've got Webtoon.
They've put your stuff on Webtoon. You'll sell 100 copies.
Easily. Like, it's just like, and you could publish all those places for free.
Yeah.
And actually,
and that's
if you want to find out more about that, there is a video on my YouTube channel. So after this interview, go check that out. But
yes, definitely. It's a good video, very informative. And I will say my nephew, who's 20, has never bought a comic book at a comic book store that was new. He buys old comics, but he reads on Webtoon and Tapas all the time, like almost every day. And all of his friends do. They've read like thousands of volumes of manga through Webtoon. And it's not just stuff that you've never heard of, which is also on Webtoon, but like classics like Berserk and things like that are on there.
They got all the big mainstream ones on there. So it's not like you're getting like, a bunch of random subpar stuff. Like if you get like Kindle, for example, and the free books that are on Kindle are, I'm sorry, they're a joke. But you get on Webtoon or Tapas or even Global Comics now.
Hell yeah,
has got a new setup now for indie guys. It's
Global
so
like
easy to get your book out there now.
Yeah, and they have big ones on there. And honestly, I hadn't heard of Global until Hamza put up his original preview over there for Crystal Compass. Mm-hmm. And he was like, I put it up on Global. And I'm like, what the hell is Global? So now all my stuff's going over there too. And it gets easier and easier every day.
Yeah, I mean, and why not? I mean, put it everywhere, right? The more eyes you can get on something, the better.
Yeah. I mean, there's ways to get comics and to get them legally and, in a safe way, I
was to say, I think we all know a few sites to get them for free, but I don't really recommend those sites.
Yeah, that's why I said legally.
Value your computer health.
Safely.
Speaking of stealing your identity, that's where they go.
That's a quick way to get it done right there.
Oh yeah.
So with Tokyo Fire, like, is this planned on being like a big long ongoing series, or are you kind of doing like maybe a 5-issue run and see what happens with it? Or
yeah, so like we planned on 7 issues. Issues 1 through 4 are already written. We're working on issue 2 right now. But yeah, 7 issues is the entire thing. I don't know how long it's going to take us to get there. We got to fund it any way we can. But that's it for Tokyo Fire. Now, say number 7 for some reason was a giant hit that got picked up by some big publisher. Sure, we could definitely do more. But it would probably be like a sequel series type deal, like Tokyo Fire 2. Right. I have 7 issues planned, partially
maybe Tokyo Ice.
Oh, okay, that's good. I as obvious as low-hanging fruit that's never been uttered in my presence before, so I like that.
It's low-hanging fruit, but it's the low-hanging fruit you have to reach for. I mean, I had to.
I love
Indie Inkwell original.
The fact that I'm the first person to say that, y'all are slacking. How am I the first person to say that?
it's that creator anxiety in me. I don't want to always make every conversation about Tokyo Fire. So I'm just like, hey guys, what are you reading? Hello, fellow teens. What are you up to? So I don't bring it up as much. But yeah, so Tokyo Ice, Tokyo Fire #2 would be volume 2, would be like a different story, but we could keep going forever. But I like keeping it limited. I like keeping it a few issues. Issue #1, Malik, is 28 pages. And that's about the size for each of the issues. Is a little bit extra, a little bit bigger than some of them.
A little for average size of a single issue, but not too bad.
Yeah, I want to keep it readable. Yeah, I want to be able to sell it at bookstores. I want to be able to sell it as like a trade when it's finished. And also, it's like I'm not made of money. I got other series that are being made. I have like something like 40 books in production right now. So,
oh wow.
Yeah, it's partially because I don't sleep. It's not that impressive. If you don't, close your eyes at night and get, healthy, you can make as many books as you want. Also, if you eat
that all the time with how much content I put out, I'm like, trust me, if you just don't sleep and have no off switch, you can do a lot.
Yeah, if you don't have a life, it's really easy to go make lots of comics. Also, go broke. If you go broke, it's there's nowhere to go but up. It's fine. Just spend all of your money on making comic books in the Barbie dream house. You gotta keep them happy at home before you can make them happy at the bookstore. But yeah, so I have other books in production that I'm trying to make, and that means I got to keep it to 7. I would love to keep it going forever, but books are expensive, man.
Oh, 100%. I'm just always curious because like some people are like, oh, I want 100 issues, and some people are like, I'm gonna just do a one shot and see how it goes.
Right.
Like, so I'm always just kind of curious of what everybody's mind state is on that.
I mean, I have series that I'm making right now that I could write for 100 issues, 150 issues. I would love that. But here's the thing. People aren't going to give me that chance when it comes to the publishers. So that's going to come out of pocket.
It's going to be a creator run deal right there. Unless you get picked up for something else before that. And then they trust you and all that blah, blah, blah.
And it's not that I don't like to dream big, and it's not like I don't like to recommend people dream big. Definitely go after it. But if you want to work in the industry, you got to be a little bit realistic. And I know what I can get away with is 7 issues for Tokyo Fire. And maybe one of my other comics might get picked up somewhere, or maybe these pitch packets that I send out to literally any publisher that will listen, maybe one of them will give me a chance. But here's the thing. Most comic books, even now when they get picked up by the big ones, aren't going 150 issues. You got to get really lucky. That's just
you're getting 5, maybe 10 issues max these days.
Exactly. Even something that sells really well, like Radiant Black right now. We were talking about it earlier. That's on issue like 28, 29. It's got like 1 million spinoffs, but those are different creative teams that are involved.
Those are different creative teams, and it's also under another publishing house as well. It's not just Image. It's Black Market Narrative, which has got its own whole team behind it.
Exactly. You nailed it right there. So there's only so much money that they're going to give you for things for so long because they can only sell the best of the best. I hate this place. One of my favorite comics from the last few years. Kyle Starks only got, I think, 10 issues of that book. He wanted to do 15. So one of the biggest writers in the industry with an awesome idea that people liked, it was winning awards, was only given 10 issues. So if you have this dream to make 150, you gotta, make reasonable expectations. You gotta lower the standard a little bit.
That's true. So once, let's say all 7 issues are done, complete, they're out, they're selling, do you think you would ever do like a collected edition of some type, like maybe like a trade paperback or like a little hardcover or something?
Of course, man. Like that is totally the goal. Let me just grab a stack here. So I have this giant bookshelf, and it's only filled with trades. That's what I buy. I'm the worst kind of person. I'm a trade waiter. That's the only thing that I go after because I'm a dad. I got to pay for the Barbie dream house. I can't buy all the single issues. I've
definitely started to shift that way. It's just easier to wait for the trade sometimes, unless it's a series I have to keep up on. Like,
there are
some need to know what happens next, like now.
The IDW, or not IDW, I'm sorry, the Image Transformers. That was one I was there day 1 for. I was so pumped for it. and I didn't want to miss it. The surprise from Void Rivals was already. I'm like, no, I'm not missing this out. I got to get that day one. Do a Power Bomb was one of the recent ones that I bought
Oh,
every
so
single month.
good.
Oh yeah.
I
I
found
love
that when it
Daniel
first
Warjout.
came out, and I was like one of 10 people talking about it when it first came out. I'm like, why are more people not talking about this?
Exactly. That was one. I still
Oh,
did buy
yeah.
the trade, obviously. So yeah, to answer
And
your,
it won
your
a
question, man.
Ringo Award. So
did.
Exactly. But yeah, definitely going to be a trade. That's my main goal. Is I want to do enough of a book to at least get a trade paperback out or a hardcover or something. I have a graphic novel in the works right now, and that's partly so I can have something big enough to be on my shelf and you can actually see the spine. Like growing up sitting over there, but you can't see it when it's flat. You know, it doesn't say "Growing Up on the Side" by T.S. Luther, so I need that just before I die.
no, I get it.
No, I think especially like going out to trades and then also like writing for trades is like a really good thing to do because my local comic book shop owner, he tells me all the time like he doesn't get a lot of people that still have like subscription boxes and do like the whole single issue thing. It's more of the older crowd that does that. He's like like the teens that come in, they're getting the trades. Fam. Like they like to read the whole storyline right there. They're not trying to wait
And I think that's
monthly.
that TikTok corruption of our brains that has made our attention
It
spans
probably is.
so short that like we all need that instant gratification. I need to trade. I need the whole thing now. I don't want to wait.
Oh.
What is wait? Like
I've had a lot of people like from publishers. Like I've had some really nice ones that they've said no, like in a nice way. And at first, a lot of them were saying things like, "Hey, I don't want this. It seems like you're writing for the trade. We need like a single issue that maybe you're lucky if you get an issue two. So don't do that." And then you talk to newer publishers, and they've also said no, by the way. But they were like, "Oh, we like that you're aiming for the trade with this, so you can see the trend as it goes."
mhm.
What is Anne's question there?
Is TS work influenced at all by his day job or his daily life?
Oh man. Well, the work itself, by my daily life, maybe not. I for a long time I worked as a technical writer for parts, really boring stuff. I wrote about like car parts, and that doesn't really influence anything. But what it does do is make you a very good business professional. I know how to email people. I know how to set a work schedule, keep everything in an Excel sheet, stuff that you learn from working at an office. And
Mhm.
then some of this in the background. So Tib and Ren and the crew, to bring it back to Tokyo Fire, they're street kids. They lived on the street, and I was homeless a little bit when I was 16, and I lived alone with my friends and my brother in like a house that was basically the house from Fight Club. And you see the sketchier side of stuff, and you do what you got to do to survive, and you learn to depend on the found family a little bit. So
Mhm.
that part definitely informs it. But my day to day being a dad, that's a little bit separate. Every once in a while, you'll see a very realistic parent in a book because I have it at home. I know how to deal with it.
Right.
But not so much on Tokyo Fire. It's not really done by the day job because the day job sucks.
I think we can all kind of relate to that. So before we do let you get out of here, because I know we got about 9 minutes left here. Is there anything else that you want to plug? Or are there any future plans that you want to make people aware of while you've got the opportunity at the moment?
Man, I have so many books coming out and
Oh,
so
so
many
you
things
said you got like
about
40 something sitting on deck. So
I-
are
so
there
I'm
any
looking-
specific ones you want to talk about?
I'm looking at the Excel sheet right now. I have 42 books in production. So I have two things I want to talk about that are coming up after Tokyo Fire. Obviously, Tokyo Fire #2. Keep an eye out for it. You can still pre-order Tokyo Fire right now at can'tbekilledcreations.com. But if you want to keep a lookout for my next thing, I'm going to do a Kickstarter one for a superhero book called Hellion and Bash. If the soft pitch is what if Batman was abusing Robin and the only person who paid attention and cared because they were complicit, everybody else was Catwoman. So Catwoman, kidnaps Robin basically to rescue him from a bad situation, and they go on basically a road trip to keep him safe from people like Superman, etc. It's my own comic book. It's like my foray into superheroes because everyone's done superheroes, so I wanted to do it in a little bit more of a serious way that's not just grim dark. Superman's evil and he punches through Batman's chest,
Mhm.
So that was that one that's coming out, and then I'm entering a contest pretty soon called Wish Upon a Star. and I'm entering my books in there as a chance to read it. So they're going to do a poll, basically, like, hey, enter in, look for T.S. Luther, vote for me so I can get some of my stuff out there. But other than that, keep an eye on campingkillcreations.com. There's lots of stuff coming. I have, like I said, 41 books right now, and they're all coming out. I would love support on all of them. But for now, Tokyo Fire #1 is what you can focus on, so I don't spread the audience too thin. I'd really appreciate it.
And you can scan that QR code right there on the screen to go to issue 1 and pre-order your copy right now.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, man.
I have a poster that I sent out to a bunch of comic book stores. Almost none of them put it up because they didn't know who I was. But I put the QR code, and the few stores that did put it up, I get notified when someone scans the QR code.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, where did you find this out about? And there was a couple shops in Florida. Reflection Comics was one. They're on TikTok, and a few others in Chicago that were like, oh yeah, this dude seems cool. None of my local shops would put up a poster. They were like, no, like, forget that. Like, what is that? Who puts up a poster? What's a QR code? Ponytail swinging.
Comic shop owners. It is 2024. Please update your advertising. Like, it's not difficult.
You get so many interesting no's. Like, that's something you get so used to in the industry. But I walked into a shop just like 2 weeks ago, and I spent like $100 there, right? There was a bunch of stuff. It was for Christmas. I had a gift card. There was a bunch of stuff there. And I go up and I go, oh, also, I sell comics. Here's my card. I'd love to put mine on the shelf or work out some sort of deal if you're interested. And they basically patted me on the head like a little kid. And they're like, oh, no, sorry, buddy. We only buy comic books from publishers, but good luck. Handed me my green crayon so I could go draw in the corner.
Oh, man. See, and they're missing out on a potential market, because if there's customers that come in, new customers that want that indie stuff, they're going to go somewhere else. When you don't,
they're gonna go to the TikTok shop, right? Like,
yeah,
bitch about it, but they're gonna buy
there's
it
a
there,
shop
right?
in my city. Shout out Laughing Ogre Comics, or the Laughing Ogre, I should say. That up on High Street, that's what they love and specialize in is indie comics. So 90% of what is on their wall is all indie stuff.
That's so cool, man.
And then you go to the back and it's all local indie, like a specific section for it.
Oh,
so it's and they say like they have a huge market for it. Like, people, of course, come in, want Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, all that nonsense.
Of course.
But if you put it there, people will look at it and be like, "Ooh, what's that?" You just gotta put it there.
I gotta hit them up and see if I can get something on the shelf, man. I love shops like that, and those are the shops that I love. I don't begrudge those shops that said no. I understand, like, they only have so much shelf space. They sell Spider-Man because Spider-Man sells. I completely understand. But
and in some markets, I do get it. There's probably not a market for indie stuff in certain spots. Like, if it's a random suburb and it's a bunch of like 12, 13-year-old kids going in there, they probably don't care about the indie stuff.
What 12, 13-year-old kids got money to go into a comic book store anymore? Like,
you'd be surprised. I've seen some 11, 12-year-olds more money than I got. Shit.
I gotta get my young adult book out soon. I just pitched a young adult book to a couple of smaller publishers. That's partly why I didn't pitch it here, is because I'm pitching it to them. And partly why I wrote it, I was really honest. I was like, this young adult stuff sells. Half my shelf over here is stuff from Scholastic, because my daughter will eat that crap up. So yeah, go write a young adult novel. You're gonna see how well Hamza does with the Crystal Compass versus Tokyo Fire. You're gonna see a very different avenue for him opening up.
I think Hamza's is going to do a lot better than he thinks it's going to do.
I tell him all the time that he's going to be so big, he's going to leave us all behind. And he's like, no, your book's great. I could learn so much from you. I'm like, yeah, okay. As you watch the numbers, raised $10,000 on Kickstarter.
When I had him on here, I was talking to him after the interview, and I'm like, dude, you don't understand how much people are going to like this book.
It's going to be huge. And I talked to so many of them.
It's like Firefly mixed with the Goonies.
With the isekai sprinkling on top. For all the manga kids.
It's so out there and different, but also very nostalgic, and just the whole vibe of it. And I cannot wait for that book to come out. And it's not even. I'm not even the target audience. It's meant for young adults and kids. but it looks like such a good story.
It's so good.
Yeah.
I talked to so many of those indie creators in our little indie community on TikTok, like Colonel Jefferson from That Nerdy Papa Bear, Irrepressible Comics. That book is like
Yeah.
it's like deprogramming people out of California with the state of Jefferson. Love that stuff. Lucky 33 Comics, Fish Tales from Mr. Fish. There's just so many cool books. Malik's putting out an amazing graphic novel. If you see him in the comments there, go check out Malik's stuff. There's too many cool people to plug, like Avena Comics.
Right.
So many of them are like, I don't know, my book's not that good. I'm like, this stuff is amazing. I wish more people knew about it because it's so inspiring. That's half the reason why I talk about it online, is because when I got on TikTok, I saw all these amazing creators talking about these books, and that let me know it was okay to talk about mine on there. And now I get to sell, all my comic books, and it's because people put it out there, and hopefully some comic book shops will follow suit and do the same.
Right. And that's why we started this show, because we see all these amazing stories that go completely overlooked by the majority of people.
Right.
Yeah,
And we got sick of having to like explain a story to somebody a bazillion times trying to introduce people to books. Like,
so now
I
we're
don't know
gonna
how
be
many
like, watch
times
an
I've had
episode of
to.
a podcast.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I could just send them a link and be like, "Go check this book out. I think you'll like it."
I love it so much. And seriously, you're doing the work here, guys. Like, I love the podcast. I love what you're doing. And it does help that all of my friends keep coming on, right? Like, you get Teresa on, I'm like cheering. I'm like, hell
and
yeah,
what's so funny about that is like the indie comic community is huge, but it's also really small at the same time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like when I go to conventions, all the people on the convention circuit, they all know each other.
Right?
Yeah,
Like when
like-
you get on there, it's like, oh, obviously people know about Bad Ink, but you also see Drawn from Key West every 30 seconds, which you should. One of the best books I've ever read.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, exactly. You
Teresa,
just like pop up.
Super, super like pleasant individual to talk to. Like
100%.
just a sweetheart.
Also, she doesn't
I'm
plug
so
it
mad
enough.
I missed that episode.
I honestly, I was sad that you missed it too. That was one of the first episodes I was able to check out live. And Braden Boyd, from
Shake
Comics, yeah, like one of the nicest people, and they're all just so welcoming. They give me so many good tips and are helping you through it. And they're not like, oh, an indie book. When people hear that, sometimes they think they're lower rent. Those books aren't as good. And it's not the case at all. These people are so amazing and talented, and they just act like, oh, it's no big deal. It's not like we're Marvel, but they're inspiring people like me and others to get into it because their books are so good. Not just that they're doing it themselves, that they're also a viable product and super impressive.
Well, and what I try to explain to some guys too, and it's like, you're not going after the same people that Marvel and DC are.
No.
Marvel and DC have their audience. They don't need new readers.
No. And they're not going to find them either. And those people that only read Marvel and DC are going to continue reading Marvel and DC. Some of them branch out. Some of them find indie books. And some of them, like, they'll jump to creator owned and then they stop, right? They jump to Image or Boom and then they don't go further past that. But the people that start with indie comics find everything. And that's the beautiful part, is when I find out, there's been a couple of times, it happened the other day, I had to have been a little kid. Somebody found Growing Up through some kid-friendly book link, and they emailed me this gobbledygook and was like, hey, can I get this comic for free? I don't have $5. So I emailed the kid, and I know they're going to go and check out other comics because their first comic book was this random indie book. So they're not going to have that like disdain for indie books like some people do. Like, I only read Spider-Man. Like, no, they start with an indie book. They're going to grow from there, and they're going to be open to all sorts of stuff on the shelf.
Oh, and that way they're going to get exposed to a lot more. I mean, you can, like, I've learned so much about just like, for example, just different cultures in comic books because it was written and drawn by somebody who didn't look like me.
Right.
I mean,
it's beautiful too. And a lot of it, like, I think about the reason why I love so many creator-owned books and indie stuff is because of stuff like Archie, which is so weird because it's still one of the biggest books ever. But to bring it back,
I was just like, even Dan Parent will tell you, I just interviewed him a month ago. He will tell you that is still an independent publisher. Archie Comics is still family owned and operated.
Right, exactly.
There is no mega corporation behind Archie Comics.
and they're still open, and it's not superheroes punching each other, and it just let me be more open to ideas. I see saying indie people jump to Image and Boom. Those are still indie. It's like, it's true. I guess those are still indie. They're just like big when it comes to indie.
Yeah, and that's where
Yeah,
I think a lot of the confusion comes in for people is Image and Boom and IDW Dark Horse. Those are all indie.
yeah.
It's
Those are the
just
big kids,
it's just that they're not little indie.
right?
You know,
Indie sort of loses the word. Like, you see a lot of arguments happening right now in video games over the word indie because a title called Dave the Diver, was up for big awards. But that's made by a very large corporation. Very small team made Dave the Diver, but a very large corporation made it. So how can that be indie? And then you look at music, who had the fight over indie anything else before, and now it's like indie doesn't mean anything in music because there's just a genre called indie, right? So it's hard to
and
say,
see,
like,
like Ann said,
independent artists.
honestly, like if you want to make it super simplified, basically anything that's not superheroes is indie because superheroes is what's mainstream.
Right. So then,
I
like,
mean,
If
the
you're
problem is,
boiling it down to the basic of the basic definition and you don't want to argue the semantics and technicalities
sure,
of stuff,
sure.
that's really all it is superheroes are the mainstream things. They've been around since 1930 fucking 9. Is Superman and Batman. Like superheroes are not going anywhere. Those are the most well-known things. Like that's the
Exactly.
mainstream.
Yeah.
And I
Anything
think a
that's
lot
not
of times,
that is something that people don't generally go out and look for or read. That's
exactly.
independent. It's
And
not
like,
owned by the big two mega corporations.
exactly. Russ is
I
talking
mean,
about too, like, go ahead,
anything.
man.
I mean, there are some, some indie superhero books out there as well.
Sure, sure.
There are for
I-
sure, but I
Uh,
also I still put that into a weird category because it's still superheroes. Like they're trying to appeal to that same mainstream audience. So once you're going for the mainstream audience, are you technically still
And like, the only way that I describe it is nobody's giving me money or helping out to make my comic book, right?
That's
Other than the
Yeah.
fans, So a lot of it is like crowdfunded comic books.
and Russell
Russ talking
Goodcall,
about,
Scout, and Mad Cave are both amazing publishers. I've got a really good relationship with the folks
Oh
over at
yeah.
Scout
And
Comics. Love
you
those
know,
guys.
I want to shout them out too, because Scout and Matt, I talked about people that were nice about no's. I've gotten a lot of mean no's over the years, a lot of like cruel, you'll never
Mhm.
make it in this industry stuff. And Scout and Mad were the first first two companies with people at it that sent very helpful and positive no's to
Like
me about some of my
constructive
comic books.
criticism. Like
100%. And
not
not even
yet,
just,
but if you work on this,
yeah, and some of it wasn't even like work on this as much as, hey, we can't publish this or we don't want it, but that doesn't mean it's not good. And then they gave me names of people to pitch it to, which was another good thing. It
Oh,
was
really?
like, yeah, which I had never seen, which was some of like really cool stuff. So shout out to Scout specifically who did that. They're like, hey, they said pitch it to Mad Cave,
I was our last
Uh,
episode was their editorial director. So I
Oh,
gotta
yeah.
say, like, they are really good people over there. They're really passionate about what they do, and they want the indie scene and new creators to thrive.
100%. And if I could give any piece of advice, if anybody listens to this, is like, don't let it get you down if they say no, because you're going to get tons of no's, and people can be assholes about it. I'm so thankful sometimes when people just say no, because it's better than not getting any response at all, and it's so much better than when people want to tear you down with it. So I say thank you every time I get a no, because they could have done something so much worse.
100%.
That is true.
And I think that's a good spot to leave it, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out with us in the live chat tonight. This has been a pretty lively episode, I'd say. This has been the most chat we've had going on in a while now live. I
yeah.
want to thank everybody for coming on. Thank you, TS, for hanging out with us and coming on the show, because if people don't come on the show, we don't have a show.
Thank you
So-
so much for having me, man.
Yeah, no problem, man. So if you guys want to go ahead and follow everything that TS has got going on, scan that QR code right there on your screen. Or if you're listening to us tomorrow, you can go and find links in the description to everything. You can get copies of Tokyo Fire issue number 1 pre-ordered right there on that QR code on your screen. And if you want to help support the show and help the independent comic book community to grow and thrive, you can head over to our merch store, which you will also find links to on your screen or in the description down below this episode. My name is JJ. My co-host name is Michael. Our guest name is TS Luther. Please, everybody, be safe, be kind, and take it easy.